On today's episode of the Nerd Byword podcast, Dave and Kris wrap up their Disney Investors Day talk by talking everything Lucasfilm. Bienvenidos a un nuevo episodio del Nerd Byword. Ay, lo siento. Sorry guys, I must have accidentally hit the SAP button on my remote. Welcome into another brand new episode of the Nerd Byword, the only podcast that can take you from the Shire to the Delta Quadrant in a matter of minutes. I'm Kris, he's Dave, and we're here to wrap up our discussion on the Disney Investor Day presentations with the Lucasfilm side of things. But before we make the jump to hyperspace, let's check in with Dave at the Nerd News Desk.
Well, I got some really strange news. So most nerds are familiar with the director Richard Donner. Dude is legendary, particularly for directing Superman the movie, The Goonies, and The Omen, if you're into scary movies. Well, as it turns out, Richard Donner, at the ripe old age of 90, is not done directing movies yet. He's also been the director for the Lethal Weapon series. In a recent interview with The Telegraph, Donner announced that he is set to direct Lethal Weapon 5. This is the final one, he said. It's both my privilege and my duty to put it to bed. It's exciting, actually. Now, Lethal Weapon, of course, is a buddy cop movie franchise starring Mel Gibson and Danny Glover. It started back in the 1980s. The last entry in the series was released in 1998. Now, progress is apparently happening on the script and gearing up production, although there are some serious hurdles for this particular production. For one, there's just a matter of the age of everybody involved. As strange as this sounds, Donner at 90 is by far the oldest, but everybody else involved is also really old. Mel Gibson at this point is 64 years old, and Danny Glover is 74. So bringing those two actors together to star in an action movie franchise as two, I hope at this point, retired cops, directed by somebody who, by the time production starts, will probably be 91 years old, is pretty incredible. Now, Donner did say this would be his final movie. At this point, he'll officially retire from directing. But let's be honest, that is absolutely incredible. What a legend and what a storied career this man has had. Kris, what do you think?
So this is wild. I remember when Lethal Weapon 4 came out, and, I had to Google it, and it came out in 98, like you said. So in addition to like the hurdles of everybody's age, I mean, like what's the catchphrase of Danny Glover's character from like the first movie is "I'm getting too old for this." So it's kind of like very, very ironic that all these years later, we're still looking at continuing this franchise on. Another one of the obvious hurdles that was mentioned in the article is the issues with Mel Gibson's character. He's in recent years gone on tangents that were deemed misogynistic, anti-Semitic, and racist as well. He has attributed those things to his alcoholism, but still, I mean, every time that I see him attached to a project, there's a level of uncomfortability with it. So I'm definitely intrigued to see what develops with this. But it really threw me for a loop when I saw this.
Yeah, and I totally, echo the problems, surrounding Mel Gibson at this point, obviously. To me, ultimately, though, it's absolutely a movie worth seeing if it does in fact happen, just because A, Donner has been a world-class director for his entire career, and B, just the novelty of knowing that there is a 90-year-old man behind the camera making this action movie franchise happen. I just want to see how this thing turns out.
Yeah, it's just really incredible that even at that age, it never stops. I'm thinking of Norman Lear, who created so many iconic television shows like All in the Family and my personal favorite, The Jeffersons and Sanford and Son. All those shows, and he's still working to this day, if memory serves. I think he's still with us, but I remember listening to an interview with him, and he was up in his 90s as well, and still just cranking it out. And it's just incredible I think it really just is a testament to the true visionaries, in no matter what industry that they work in, is they don't have an off switch. It never stops.
Absolutely. So, I mean, the guy gave us Superman the movie. For that alone, he needs to be commended. So, I'm really looking forward to this one. Chris, what is going on your side of the nerd news desk? And please tell me that you're not going to set my blood boiling with another Zack Snyder story.
Well, I feel like it's a role reversal here that I'm reporting on DC again. But so DC Films is headed to the multiverse, and there are no future plans that involve Zack Snyder with DC Films. So Walter Hamada, who is the kind of new since 2018 president of DC Films, spoke in an extensive interview with the New York Times. It's a really good article. I definitely recommend you check it out. A lot of things came to light, but I'm going through the highlights here. So the DC film plan going forward, beginning in 2022, is for their most expensive films, ideally 4 per year, to release theatrically. 2, as the article noted, riskier film projects like Batgirl or Static Shock to be released on HBO Max, which, interesting note here, the article by Brooks Barnes referred to it, and I quote, as its fledgling streaming service. DC Films is also going to work on developing offshoots, which are television series on HBO Max that will directly interconnect with those films. Interesting stats that were included in the article. In the last decade, DC Films have made $8 billion compared to Marvel's $20.6 billion. So once again, they're trying to keep up with the Joneses and rapidly, play catch up here. HBO Max has 12.6 million subscriber activations. Now, that is still not widely available outside the US, so their numbers are incredibly limited. In addition to the hefty $14.99 price tag. Netflix, by comparison, has 195 million, and Disney Plus has 87 million. However, it was confirmed that the DC film universe will be utilizing the multiverse, including multiple Batmen, as has been previously discussed on this show, in The Flash, but also Robert Pattinson's Batman film going forward as well. So they are specifically going to be making a focus on the multiverse. So many things that come to light with that. But one nugget that I'm going to be biased here that made me gleeful was that at least for now, Zack Snyder is not part of the new DC Films blueprint. This is important to point out that Walter Hamada, the president of DC Films, came on in 2018 after many of those Zack Snyder projects, came to light. So he's not part of their blueprint and the plan going forward, with studio executives describing his HBO Max project as, quote, a storytelling cul-de-sac, a street that leads nowhere. Dave, you're our DC guy. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I have a lot of complex feelings about this one. On the one hand, not having any more Zack Snyder projects for the foreseeable future that are DC based is, I think, ultimately a good thing. The man is a talented director, and although he catches a lot of flack from me on this show for his work on the DC movies he has directed, I will go on the record as saying that I enjoy a great deal of his work. In fact, his feature film debut as a director, the remake of Dawn of the Dead, I enjoyed a great deal. And I still think the Legend of the Guardians animated feature that he directed is probably his finest movie. I'm a big fan of that one as well. However, I don't think he's a good fit tonally for most DC properties. He has a very distinctive style from how he, records color palettes and muted tones. The amount of slow-mo shots he does in his action is very distinct. And I don't think necessarily what, the kind of work that he does lends itself naturally to comic book movies. Now, I will say that I'm also hyped for the idea of using a multiverse structure for these movies. Simply put, it frees DC from the idea of having to play the game that the MCU does, that everything has to be interconnected, that these heroes have to pop up in each other's movies, that everything has to lead to some big Avenger style blowout. I think trying to imitate that and imitating it too quickly was to the great detriment of the DC Extended Universe. They didn't take their time really building up some of these individual franchises and creating something that would build hype towards a movie like Justice League. So this seems like a smart move. It allows for stuff like, Joaquin Phoenix in The Joker, which obviously is never going to meet Robert Pattinson's Batman because they just take place in different time periods. So unless you want a geriatric Joker trying to fight, a young Batman, this is just not going to happen. But that's okay because I think those movies are different beasts altogether. So the multiverse idea is great. I really like that. However, my fear is, and they're already hinting at this, is that they're not going to use this multiversal structure to free artists to really pursue a particular artistic vision, and bring in some lesser known properties. One of the things that Marvel has done really well with is bringing in stuff like Guardians of the Galaxy, which a lot of people thought as a movie was going to fail because it was such an unknown property. There are so many things that DC has that need to be on the big screen in some way. Animal Man, Grant Morrison has a fantastic run on that. Legion of Superheroes, a big space-based superhero movie, with a sprawling cast would be fascinating. A Martian Manhunter feature film, Young Justice, but based on Peter David's run with a more humorous approach. The Outsiders, Manhunter, Nightwing, even. There's so many interesting properties that they could be pursuing, but what they're doing instead is Batman. No, we don't just need one Batman. We need to put a system in place by which we can have multiple Batmen. Let's go ahead and throw a whole bunch of Batmen into the Flash movie. And in addition, we'll have Robert Pattinson's Batman, and then apparently an additional parallel running Batman franchise in addition to the Robert Pattinson Batman. To which I say, you know what? No thanks. Too much Batman. I'm about Batmaned out at this point. I want to see some new properties being developed by DC. And one of the big problems with the DC movie side of things is that they simply continuously rely on the old standby that made them money, and that's Batman. And Batman has to be in everything. And that's not a good approach in trying to diversify your movie output, and maybe building some new franchises that ultimately will help rake in some money. The Guardians of the Galaxy movies are not creating change box office receipts here. They do extremely well. Why can't DC pursue something like that? So, on the one hand, less Snyder for the time being, good. Multiverse, good. Too much Batman. Let's back off on that and try some new stuff. How about that?
Yeah, I'm dying for a Martian Manhunter film. Like, I would do anything to see that. I mean, like, or even, it's funny because as a casual DC consumer, like, I can tell, I can look at those things of Zack Snyder, I can look at those outputs, and I know that's just wrong. That's not it. And to what you said, that's not those characters. Like, even with my limited exposure to those characters, I can size that up and say that's not Batman, that's not Superman, that's sure as hell not Superman. It's just odd. That's not Lois Lane. I mean, Amy Adams, God love her, she's very talented in so many other things, she's great, but the extent to her Lois Lane was just looking big doughy-eyed into the camera and just swooning at Clark Superman every time he came on the screen. Like, there was no agency for her. They put her in the desert like she was some dangerous reporter, but then that never followed up to anything. It's just so. I'm really of two minds here as well. I'm glad that there's a new person in charge in Walter Hamada that is looking at this and say, look, this doesn't work. The way we've been doing things isn't working. We're going to try something new. But I'm also by not doing like a connected universe, it still seems like they're going to try at the same end result, and it feels like we're headed towards like an Infinite Crisis or Crisis on Infinite Earths type of thing, where all these Batmans are just going to mash up together. And why in the world are we getting multiple Batmen but not multiple other characters? Like it's the Iron Man syndrome that we talked about on the last podcast. And it's the Wolverine problem that the Fox X-Men franchise had. Like, for God's sake, there are other characters. And if you tell a good story, people will watch your movie. Dave, like, what the first movie that you and I saw together in the theaters was Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm like a huge Marvel fanboy. Like I geek out about those characters. Like I do in-depth like binge reads, and I didn't know anything about any of those characters. Like I had to do like a Wikipedia search, like going as we were headed to the theater. And I still just remember looking over at you like every 5 minutes to just be like, dude, is all we could say to each other. And then, like weeks and months after that movie, every time we would see each other at work in the hall, we would be like, dance off, you and me, bro. Like when you just have a clear vision with and tell good stories, the fruits will come. You don't have to. And we also talk, I've also talked about this a lot, like nostalgia and like just always going backwards. And we're going to visit that today, unfortunately, with Star Wars, but always going forward and trying new things. I love Michael Keaton's Batman, but that was from 30 plus years ago. Why are we treading backward and the things that worked in the past? Why aren't we trying new things? For Pete's sake, we got an Aquaman movie that was just glorious and wonderful and fun. We got a Shazam movie that was fun. And so why aren't we pushing towards that instead of just more of the same old stuff?
Yeah, I'm with you. And I will say, even like the Michael Keaton Batman thing, that should not be happening the way it is. You want Michael Keaton back as Bruce Wayne? Wonderful. Give me a Batman Beyond movie. Now here's a property that'll definitely catch on. It has a good history as a animated series and then a comic book. And there you can have a little bit of a touch of nostalgia and still at the same time push forward with something new. Instead, we're going to probably have Michael Keaton in some kind of Batman suit with Ben Affleck hanging out next door to him or something, interacting with the Flash. And it's just like, why can't I just have a Flash movie? I don't understand why we can't, just tell a good story with those characters. And I'm going to say something about Martian Manhunter. I have such a pitch for a Martian Manhunter movie. My absolute two favorite things to come out of the 40s and 50s are noir detective stories and these old cheesy flying saucer, Martian movies.
I already see where you're going with this. Shut up and take my money.
Yeah, let's go ahead and mash those two together. One of the things about the Martian Manhunter is he's a shapeshifter, and oftentimes he takes on identities of like policemen or detectives, to do some investigating and stuff. So why not have a mashup of these two genres and have, the Martian Manhunter? He's stranded on Earth, and he is trying to solve some kind of noir-style crime while at the same time, being pursued by like government agents that are trying to find out what crash landed on Earth or something. It's just a great mashup project. Heck, you could, you want to have a superhero movie in black and white. Now, this one you could actually do in black and white to go along with the vibe that you're going for, and you would really create something that has not been on the big screen before, a noir superhero movie with the sci-fi 50s, overtones. Like, I would be totally there for something like that. But it seems like right now, at DC Films, the vision to try something different and new is simply not there, and that's super regrettable.
Well, yeah, and that's what the one big positive that I came away from in our last episode, and the Marvel side of their reveals is that they're really leaning into those subgenres, and you think about like the best MCU films, like they really stood out. I mean, Ant-Man, the Ant-Man films have no business being that good. Like, but with a cast like that, and then just making it a heist movie, and it's just fun, and you just have fun with it. Like Shazam had no business being that good. But you have an individual like Zachary Levi who's just like, you can't help but love that guy. He's just so awesome, and he looks like a little kid that got superpowers, but in adult form. So I mean, like, when you just embrace something and have a clear vision, and then on the other part about Michael Keaton, how amazing was he as the Vulture? Like, it's one of the best MCU villains that we've had.
Totally.
And just think about how amazing he would be as, like, and I haven't watched a whole lot of Batman Beyond, but I know enough. Just think about how great he would be as, like, a grumpy old Bruce Wayne, a la like Clint Eastwood in Gran Torino or something like that. That would just be perfect.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree, man. There's so much potential on the DC, side of, movies and television shows, but what we're seeing so far, I don't know, man. I hope that they get their act together. I really do.
It's really a shame because they're billed as the world's greatest heroes, and they're easily, even as a Marvel fan, I will freely admit this, they're the easily most identifiable. You think to, like, casual consumers who don't really know a whole lot about comic books, who aren't really the nerds that we are, but if you say Batman and Superman, people know who that is. They know who Wonder Woman is more so than they would, like the Marvel heroes, especially before the, integration of the MCU. It's certainly much more recognizable. So it really is disheartening to see this.
It is an absolute crying shame that at this point we simply cannot get a good Superman movie. It's just it boggles my mind that we cannot get a good Superman movie. He is not that difficult to figure out, and there are so many comic book writers who have him figured out. I just want a good Superman movie. That should be like point zero. That's where you should be starting out from. Give me a good Superman movie.
Well, here's the thing. Who's his Marvel counterpart? Like, who's most similar to him in the Marvel universe?
I'd say Captain America. As far
Captain America. And we got and we got some badass Captain America movies. Like, as cheesy and as corny as it was, Captain America: The First Avenger is one of my favorite MCU films, one of my favorite superhero films, because it has that heart, it has that hope, it has the do the right thing ethos that Superman would have. You can easily do that. It's just a shame.
yeah, I totally agree.
All right, that wraps up our nerd news segment. Nerd rant over for the time being. When we come back from our first break, we are hopping aboard the Millennium Falcon. Hopefully the hyperdrive will work this time. And then we are going to the Lucasfilm reveals of Disney Investors Day. Stick around. Welcome back, nerds. For our Byword Big Talk today, we are wrapping up the Disney Investors Day reveals. We talked about the MCU last episode. Today, we're talking all about Lucasfilm. So we're going to go announcement by announcement, line by line, itemized list like we did last time. I'm going to kick it to Dave. He's going to give the reaction. Away we go. First up on our list, Dave. We hinted at this one a couple episodes ago. Really interesting concept and a really great director at the helm. One of the most emotional videos that I saw out of Investors Day is the reveal. Patty Jenkins of Wonder Woman fame is going to be directing Star Wars Rogue Squadron coming Christmas 2023.
Yeah, Rogue Squadron. Now here's a name with a lot of history, and for me at least, a lot of emotional attachment. Obviously, Rogue Squadron played a big role in Marvel's Star Wars comics. But to me, the connection to the franchise that I probably have the most came from the expanded universe, particularly Michael Stackpole and Aaron Alston's novels. And there were, I believe, 9 or 10 overall X-Wing books. And the first one, of course, of the series was Star Wars X-Wing Rogue Squadron. So I have a very special place in my heart for, Rogue Squadron. Now, this particular movie, directed by Patty Jenkins, is reportedly going to be completely original, so it's not going to be based on anything from the expanded universe. It most likely will not bring over any of those characters, which I think is sad. I think there's a possibility that if not adapting any of that stuff, that at the very least there is a possibility to maybe bring an interesting character or two over, which would, I think, bring about a lot of goodwill from expanded universe fans who miss some of the characters that were, wiped out by Disney's Order 66. But I think my biggest concern about this movie right now is simply that it needs a good writer. Jenkins is a super talented director. I absolutely have loved her work on Wonder Woman. I just, finished Wonder Woman 1984 yesterday. And my feelings about that movie from a writing perspective are pretty complex. There are some interesting things happening in the story part, but whatever weaknesses I may have detected in the story had nothing to do with Patty Jenkins' direction. The movie is visually absolutely gorgeous and expertly shot. So Patty Jenkins as the director is a great idea. She seems to have a passion for the idea of making a Rogue Squadron movie, something that is inspired by fighter plane kind of movies. I can totally see her do an excellent job with this. But what we need for sure is somebody who can deliver an interesting story. And I'm unsure even like timeline wise where this would take place. One of the things that I absolutely loved about the first 4 X-Wing books in the expanded universe written by Michael Stackpole were that they had a very clear overarching mission, and that was the conquest of Coruscant. So the New Republic could become, a legitimate government by holding the planet where the Galactic Senate is supposed to meet. So that was a fantastic sort of overarching mission for Rogue Squadron. So I'm not sure where in the timeline this is supposed to take place, if this is going to be like in the timeline around the time of the Mandalorian, sort of post Return of the Jedi, or if this is going to be, around the time of the sequel trilogy. I think a lot of my interest in the original story they come up with is going to be dependent on when they set it and what their overarching goal is in the movie.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I think as someone that is not very experienced, basically nothing at all with the expanded universe, I always think about John Jackson Miller's answer. When it came to that era of Star Wars, and that it could be true, it could not be true, and some of it could be true. So I'm really interested, with a title like Rogue Squadron being, as popular as it is. I find it very hard to believe that they wouldn't find a way to bridge that together to in some of the similar ways that they did with The Mandalorian, to bring in old and new fans alike. So that's just my gut reaction to it. I don't really have any extended experience with the title, so I'm just interested to see. Probably, I probably fall in line with you. Is where and when is this going to take place? On our last episode, we talked about the Marvelification of Star Wars and how they want to make it like a connected universe type thing, and where things will kind of line up. So that just makes me kind of lean towards Mandalorian era timeline, but I'm definitely interested to see this develop further.
Yeah, me too. And being somebody who has read, extensively in the expanded universe, I'll freely admit the expanded universe was far from perfect, but there were some really good ideas and concepts and characters in there, and I think even in the name of originality, Disney would be kind of disservicing sort of the Star Wars franchise by not taking some of the best stuff that the expanded universe had to offer and integrating some of those things. I mean, they certainly did it already with Grand Admiral Thrawn, which is, peak expanded universe character right there. So, here's hoping. But my gut tells me this is probably going to be completely 100% original.
All right, next up on the docket. Oh man, I'm so psyched about this one. No release date, but an untitled Taika Waititi Star Wars project. Here's a quote from Kathleen Kennedy, head of Lucasfilm. Taika's approach to Star Wars will be fresh, unexpected, and ... unique. His enormous talent and sense of humor will ensure that audiences are in for an unforgettable ride. Dave, your thoughts?
I'm just excited for this. Taika Waititi is just incredibly talented filmmaker. I just period. He is ... unique, as Kathleen Kennedy said, and so seeing his take on Star Wars, I think, could be incredibly fun to watch. Now, I'm assuming this is probably going to be a movie released to the theaters. I didn't see anything in the documentation that this was planned to be like a Disney Plus series or something. So, big screen adventure, directed by the guy who directed Thor Ragnarok, for crying out loud. Win in my book. The guy clearly has some fun, with getting on different planets and space and all that stuff. I think he's the right guy to do something fresh with Star Wars. I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, and if memory serves, I think it was the 7th episode of the first season that he directed of The Mandalorian, and it was just pitch perfect. He served as the bounty hunter droid. I forget its name, but he was perfect. He could do it all. Thor Ragnarok is probably my favorite, if not second favorite, entry into the MCU. It's just so fresh, and it takes a new take. And even though this may be an unpopular take, I love Thor: The Dark World, even with all its warts. I love that movie. It was a much needed breath of new life into the Thor franchise, and really revitalized it. Um, he's also in a show that I am visiting for the first time, and will probably be a nerd commendation quite soon. What We Do in the Shadows. He's just a complete visionary. Him alongside Jermaine Clement. It is just, it's so hilarious and just so off the wall and just absolutely bonkers that it desperately, I'm desperately just cannot wait for this, because it's just going to be weird and odd and quirky and hilarious. I mean, Korg is directing a Star Wars movie. What more do you need?
Yeah, I think that sums it up perfectly. I'm very excited for this. I wish there was more to report at this time about it.
Yeah.
I'm really interested to see what he's going to do with it. But yeah, let's just go for it. I'm on board for this one.
Also reminds me I still have to watch Jojo Rabbit, because I've heard wonderful things about that as well. All right, next up, a series that I've been waiting for since it was first announced years ago, Obi-Wan Kenobi. No release date yet, but it is an event miniseries set 10 years after the Revenge of the Sith. And the big news coming out of this is that Hayden Christensen will be returning as Darth Vader. Dave, your thoughts?
It's all good in the neighborhood. I would first of all say that Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi was probably the best thing about the prequels. The guy was just really, really good, especially in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. I think he was a little underserved in Phantom Menace, just because they, had the Qui-Gon Jinn character there, which I think kind of superfluous if we would have had just a little bit of an older Obi-Wan there instead. But I'll take it. The guy is just good as Obi-Wan. Hayden Christensen being back is also really neat. Obviously, I've said this before on the pod, I don't think I've ever really truly blamed him for the portrayal of Anakin. I think a lot of that just came down to the writing. George Lucas is... his dialogue is problematic, I guess is the best way to put it. Very difficult to deliver in a believable way. I mean, he's directed Oscar winners and managed to make them look pretty bad with some of the dialogue that he's written. So poor Hayden Christensen, I don't think ever stood a chance there. So seeing him back as Vader, I think, is a lot of fun. I think this is a very high interest project for me, just because I have a real love for the Obi-Wan character, even going back to A New Hope. I know it's, event mini series, so this is not going to have like a second season or something, and I think it's very short. I heard like 6 episodes or something the last time I looked it up. So this is not going to be, some sprawling continuous epic like something, in the vein of The Mandalorian. But for what it is, sort of a check-in on Obi-Wan Kenobi in that in-between time between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. Yeah, I'm very, very interested in seeing what they come up with for that. So yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic about this one.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued as well, simply because how is this Hayden Christensen thing going to work? Is he going to be full on Vader, and are they going to require James Earl Jones to be the voice of Darth Vader? Is this going to be flashback sequences and, feature some of the bits that we saw in Clone Wars, stuff like that? But I'm very, very hopeful. Obi-Wan is probably my second favorite Star Wars character behind Ahsoka Tano. And I'm just really excited to see more of his story. I'm also excited to see that Deborah Chow is the one the director of all of this. She directed the third, I think it was the third episode of season 1 of The Mandalorian. Just a magnificent episode. So, for me, I always want to see who's behind the camera. As it's as important, if not more important than the actors themselves. So, seeing a name like that attached, I'm very very excited about it. Also, I'm very interested to see the aging process on Tatooine and how Obi-Wan went from being a middle-aged man to a very, very old man with Sir Alec Guinness. And after recently watching and loving Birds of Prey, I will watch anything that Ewan McGregor is attached to, because he is, as Roman Sionis Black Mask was just a revelation. I did not see that one coming, man.
Yeah, you said something interesting there. One of the criticisms we had when we quote unquote fixed the prequels is that a lot was made about the relationship between Obi-Wan and Anakin Skywalker. And they always kind of told us, oh, they're really good friends. Oh, you were my brother, blah, blah, blah. But we never actually saw that, in actions. You had to really go to the Clone Wars cartoon to get a sense of that friendship, of that camaraderie. And so, yeah, you know what? I'm just going to say it. I hope that one of the reasons they brought Hayden back is to have flashback sequences. I think we desperately need to fill in some of those live action blanks and have these two characters, in flashback, be really brothers in arms, be really close, be the closest of friends. It is the number one oversight, I think, of the prequels, that we never quite buy that those two people are close. And so, yeah, I really hope that they do those flashbacks.
Yeah, for sure. And for all the roses and for all the flowers that I will give to Dave Filoni and everyone behind Clone Wars and Rebels as some of the best Star Wars content ever, animation is a hard sell for a lot of people. And when I start recommending Clone Wars and Rebels to some Star Wars fans, they start to like just shoo me away. Like, it's not easy to sell animation to adults. So I think this is a much needed inclusion here, because while I got what I needed from those series, a lot of Star Wars fans did not.
Yeah, that's a fact. So, here's hoping. I think, obviously they had, Darth Vader in Rogue One, and they didn't bring, Hayden Christensen back for that. So I'm assuming there's got to be at least some kind of sequence of him not in the suit for them to be so insistent that they needed him back for this particular role.
For sure. All right, so I hinted at it a little bit when we were talking about this series, but next up is the one that I'm most geeked out for, Ahsoka. No release date, but it is a limited series starring Rosario Dawson and written by Dave Filoni. Dave, your take.
I think Rosario Dawson did a fantastic job. Yeah, I'm getting caught up on The Mandalorian finally. Yeah, it's been a process. Did a fantastic job in this particular role. I'm very excited to see more of her. The question I think that arises in my mind about this particular series is what they're trying to accomplish with it. So based on, spoiler alert for those of you not caught up with The Mandalorian, here obviously, for those of you a little bit familiar with, the Clone Wars and then the Rebel series, it was quite a mic drop moment when it was revealed that she was looking for Grand Admiral Thrawn during her appearance on The Mandalorian. If the mission statement of the show is that she's looking for Grand Admiral Thrawn, and by extension looking for Ezra Bridger, then that is very, very interesting to me, especially if they're willing, to go there. Are we actually going to get a live action Ezra Bridger? Are we going to get, lo and behold, a live action Grand Admiral Thrawn? Now, these are the kinds of things, on top of this being just, an Ahsoka series, that I would be very, very interested in seeing. Again, as a fan of the old extended universe, I love Grand Admiral Thrawn as a character, and seeing him realized in live action would be just a real treat. Plus, I think, Rebels ended in a way where there's a lot of, open-ended elements to it. And if we could, pick up on some of that and maybe give some closure to that whole situation, that would be a real win as well. And I think there's a way to do that where it's still, new viewer friendly, but at the same time has those sort of Easter eggs and treats that The Mandalorian, for example, provided so well. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this on a number of levels. I really hope that this series is going where I think it's going, because that would hype me up even more.
Yeah, so this might be my hot take of the week. Star Wars Rebels, outside of the original trilogy, is probably my favorite Star Wars content, period. I love that show so much. I think the character work on that show and the voice acting on that show is just out of this world ridiculously good. I love Kanan Jarrus. I love Captain Syndulla. I love the entire cast of that show. It's so good. And so if we can get some Ezra Bridger and Grand Admiral Thrawn, like, I'm so geeked out. In addition to just the pitch perfect portrayal of Rosario Dawson, I will say it felt a little bit weird hearing Rosario Dawson's voice and not Ashley Eckstein's voice. As perfect as it was, it took me a second to kind of adjust to not hearing Ashley Eckstein talking. But this is written by Dave Filoni. Ahsoka, alongside George Lucas, this is his creation, so you couldn't ask for a better person behind this. So I'm super excited. The fact that it's a limited series is exciting. I think less is more when it comes to episodes, and they really pack a punch. Like, the more that you draw out a season, I think that's one of the strengths of The Mandalorian too, is that it is so quick, and the episodes are a bit short, but it makes every moment, you just appreciate it that much more, for me.
Yeah, I can totally agree with that. This is definitely going to be one to watch.
All right, next up, we have no release date, but this one threw me for a loop. Rangers of the New Republic. Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau are going to be producing, the dynamic duo themselves, and it will, quote, intersect with future stories and culminate into a climactic story event. What you got on this one, Dave?
Meh. I mean, I don't mean to sound negative. Obviously, the people involved, interesting, sure. When I look at this, what I see basically is, hey, we're trying to do, the culminating event, the big Avengers thing. But this particular element of it is just completely a blank slate. I have no idea what to expect here. I mean, I know they're going to probably bring in Boba Fett and The Mandalorian and Ahsoka, because those are all sort of taking place, within the same timeline. And then this series, and then they're going to have some kind of big climactic, crossover, I guess, between all those series. Fun, I'm sure. But Rangers of the New Republic, one of the things that I struggle with the Disney era of Star Wars is that New Republic means basically next to nothing. That phrase means basically next to nothing to Star Wars fans right now. We saw nothing of it except for, oh, oops, it's, been blown up in The Force Awakens, So the New Republic for expanded universe fans, well, that is, a significant term. It extremely important. And so, yeah, I don't know. Rangers of the New Republic means absolutely nothing to me at this point, and until they tell me what this is, and what it's that title is even supposed to evoke, I have nothing. I'm just like, we'll see what it is first.
Yeah, I'm totally of the same mindset. We don't even know, like, any characters that are attached to this specifically. The only people that I can think of are those two pilots that showed up in the second episode of The Mandalorian of season 2. And if that's their big pitch, that's going to be quite underwhelming. I doubt that is it. But when I think of New Republic, those are the only people that come to mind. So I don't know where they're going with this. It's the one that I overwhelmingly was kind of underwhelmed with.
Yeah, me too. Like, I got nothing, man. We'll see what it is first. Right now, interest level very low.
All right, next up, I'm flipping the switch because this is one I'm very, very excited about, even though we have minimal details. Lando, no release date, no word if Donald Glover or Billy D. Williams is confirmed, but Justin Simeon of Dear White People is developing the story.
All right, so Lando. Let's talk Lando for a second. First of all, Donald Glover's performance as Lando in A Star Wars Story was fantastic. And so I don't think there is a Lando series without Donald Glover. But I'll go a step further and say that I don't think there's a Lando series without Billy D. Williams as well. I think the ideal circumstance here is some kind of dual storytelling. Either you have, Lando in the future, Billy D. Williams telling some kind of story about his youth, or maybe even being on an adventure that kind of ties back to something that happened in his youth, and then have, flashback sequences with Donald Glover as Lando. I think that would be sort of the perfect bridge between, old Star Wars and new Star Wars, and would be really, really fun to watch. So my hope is that we don't just get Donald Glover. My hope is that we get both Donald Glover and Billy D. Williams for this show. That would be fantastic.
I can't add or take away anything from that because it's perfect. That's exactly what I want. I want both of them. Do you want Donald Glover or Billy D. How about both? I want both. Both is good. What's that gif of from oh god, what's that movie? Road to El Dorado. Both
Correct,
is good. Yeah.
Both is good.
So I mean, God, they're both so just awesome. Like they're these like sex symbol icons of like they're just awesome machismo dudes, and like they are absolute screen magnets. Like they chew up every scene that they're in, and I can't think of a better person to have been cast in Solo. Y'all need to look at that movie again. I'm telling you, it's a good movie, especially the third act. I love Solo. It gets crapped on a lot because of so many different things, but I really, really enjoy it. And Donald Glover is one of the chief reasons why. Justin Simeon being attached is really, really fascinating to me. I know it's not a nerdy thing, but I highly recommend Dear White People I haven't seen the original documentary, but the Netflix series is just delightful. It's really, really funny and it's really, really insightful. But so definitely check that one out. But so the fact that he's attached is really interesting, and I'm just excited to see the development of this show.
Yeah, I'm as well. I think this has potential to be, really something special, and I really hope, they lean into it.
All right, next up is a character that I immediately clung to and then was killed off. Spoiler alert, but Rogue One came out forever ago, so you should have seen it. Andor, no release date. Cassian Andor. Diego Luna returns as Cassian Andor from Rogue One. It returns in this prequel spy thriller. Dave, your take.
So first of all, very good move making a spy thriller set in the Star Wars universe. Again, very much like DC or Marvel, one of the things that I think people making Star Wars content have to figure out is how to get into these subgenres. Not everything has to feel like, a bunch of Jedi throwing, force lighting and lightsabers at each other. I think there's really something to be said for hitting, a comedy set in Star Wars, a spy thriller set in the Star Wars universe. There is a lot to be said for diversifying, and a spy thriller set in the Star Wars universe sounds incredibly interesting to me. I definitely want to experience this. I'll also go on the record as saying that I absolutely adored Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. And one of the big regrets at the end, although I understand why they did it from a storytelling perspective, that I had once I watched that movie, was simply that, well, spoiler alert, everybody died. Like, everybody. And there were so many interesting characters in that movie that I wished I could have seen more of. So I'm glad we're getting this prequel. I really am. Cassian Andor was a fascinating character in this story. I wish there was, I almost wish we could get more of a sequel to Rogue One than a prequel, so we could see some of these other characters as well. But at this point, I'll just take what I can, because I really, really enjoyed Rogue One.
Well, here's another bit that I forgot to introduce. This is probably the most important part. Alan Tudyk is returning as K2SO, and nerds around the world love and appreciate Alan Tudyk. I mean, from I absolutely love everything he's in. There's a show on Sci-Fi coming up where he's like an alien and he's like trying to disguise himself that I can't wait to watch. I forget the name of it, but
Resident Alien,
Resident Alien.
Based on
yes,
also based on a comic book. Yeah, it's also comic book based.
Cannot wait for that show. I love everything that he's in.
The comic book is quite good as well.
I'll have to definitely check that one out. But even from my first introduction to him in watching Dodgeball, and Pirate Steve. I just love his work.
Steve the Pirate.
God, I love him. Also,
Oh man.
Death at a Funeral, the original UK version. He's just magical, and he's just sitting on the roof, absolutely naked. Alan Tudyk is just the best. So yeah, I'm very, very excited for this, and you nailed it. I also will follow Diego Luna to the ends of the earth. I mean, he's just freaking fantastic in everything. The Book of Life I showed in my class for the Day of the Dead, and he's magnificent there. He's incredible in Narcos Mexico. I need to go back and finish that series, but he's just incredible in that. And so I'm just super excited to see him return and to get more stories from this, because it also, Rogue One, his character and the things that he's willing to do in order to make the rebellion, come to fruition is just fascinating. He's offing people left and right, and he's getting ready to snipe Jyn Erso's father, Galen Erso, in the name of the rebellion. So being able to see like the backstory to all of that and how he got there is just really, really cool.
Yeah, I totally agree. This is one to look forward to.
All right, next up, this one threw me for a loop. We have The Acolyte. Leslie Headland, creator of Russian Doll, is developing the series. It's a mystery thriller set in the High Republic era.
Meh. Well, I don't mean to sound negative, and I'm sure it'll turn out well once we know more. I think my problem just is that it takes place in this High Republic era, like 50 years before the prequels or something. This is like Disney's big multimedia push right now. There's going to be movies and TV shows, comic books, novels. They're trying to do like this whole like young Yoda thing at some point. I think I saw some concept art of like Yoda as a younger Jedi. Until I see more of what they're actually doing with this era, it feels like it might suffer a little bit from prequelitis. How much more do I need to see of this incredibly flawed, corrupted Jedi Order? I mean, the Jedi do not come across very well in the prequels, and I'm not sure how much more I need to see of the Jedi Order and their complete mishandling of pretty much everything. The child snatchers that make the kids completely cut off contact with their parents, and can't admit when their ability to use the Force is diminished because they don't want to look bad in front of the politicians. And I don't know, man. Like, I love me some Jedi, but the way they were shown in the prequels does not give me a lot of hope that just because it's 50 years earlier or something, that the Jedi Order is going to be really any better.
Yeah, so one of my favorite quotes that I've heard in the last couple of years is when I was watching the Luke Cage Marvel series, and Pops always said, "Always forward, never backward," and has become like this like mantra for me. And so like I've talked time and again about nostalgia and just going backwards and thinking back, and that's one of the few criticisms I have of the second season of The Mandalorian. While I enjoy it, I'm a little bit frustrated. We always have to circle back to the same things in Star Wars, and just going backward and not ever pushing forward. And so that's why I was excited about a new story in The Mandalorian, but it also ended up being more of the same, which is a little bit frustrating. And pushing back, as much as I love Boba Fett, season 3 of The Mandalorian and this new story arc is being delayed because of the Book of Boba Fett. It's a little bit frustrating. And so here we have more of the same, like catering to the old fans who were unhappy with the sequel trilogy. And I'm not by any means defending the sequel trilogy, because I have my issues with it, but it's just frustrating that it seems like we're in reverse here.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Now we're getting prequels to the prequels, and again, Leslie Headland is very talented, and this could end up being a fantastic series. I'm just wondering what it actually gains from being set in the High Republic era, in particular. A lot of questions about this one, and not a lot of answers. So I think I'm just going to take a wait and see approach.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's with a lot of these the stories as well, is we don't have a lot of details, so there's not a whole lot that we can have to inform our takes. All right, next up is something that was hinted at quite a while ago. I think we even covered it on a Nerd News story, if memory serves. No release date, but The Bad Batch is coming. I have to be careful how I pronounce that. Elite clones that were introduced in the final season of the Clone Wars become mercenaries in the aftermath of the Clone Wars, and it is a sequel to the Clone Wars cartoon. Dave, your thoughts?
You know what? I don't think I'm qualified to comment because I've not actually seen the last season of the Clone Wars. Yeah, I've not gotten around to that yet, so shame on me. Please do not revoke my nerd cred card. But um, I'm not familiar with the Batch. I'm not uh, clear on if these characters are interesting enough to maintain a series on their own. I don't think I'm the guy to ask here. Have you seen the final season of the Clone Wars?
Oh yes, I have, and it is some great Ahsoka Tano content. The Bad Batch was the first arc that was set up, and it was a bit underwhelming and a little bit boring, if I'm being honest. So the trailer for this was pretty cool, but I'm not. I don't know, interested to see how it looks like this is when the Empire takes over, and now like they're no longer going to be stormtroopers, but they're going to be mercenaries. So that's a bit of a unique storyline. So that's interesting. But I was in it. I may revisit the final season, but I was just ready to get to Order 66 and more Ahsoka content. So those first couple episodes with the Bad Batch were pretty hit or miss for me.
Yeah, so once I'm caught up, I might have more of an opinion about all this, but as of right now, I just don't. I'm very unsure if this would be my kind of show or not. It's just, I don't think I'm ready to comment on this one.
Well, here's an interesting one. Star Wars Vision is an anime creator's take on Star Wars, and it's a series of 10 shorts. Dave, are you an anime guy?
I actually am an anime guy. I remember very fondly, for example, back in the heyday of the Matrix when they did that collection of stories called the Animatrix. I thought there was some very interesting takes in there on the concept of the Matrix explored through anime. So yeah, I'm actually very excited about this. Anything that brings unique art styles or different creators' visions to the Star Wars universe is a good thing. I think to avoid that whole the problem that the MCU sometimes has is that samey feeling, like everything is pretty much the same. Diversify that sucker a little bit. So yeah, I'm very, very excited to see some anime creators take on Star Wars and what they do with it. I'm actually very interested to see if Disney is willing to say that these stories are, in their official canon, that these are part of their overarching story, or if this is just some kind of like Elseworld situation, a what if kind of thing. Looking forward to seeing what they're doing with this.
So anime by and large has been one of the offshoots of nerddom that has escaped me. I played some of the Pokemon games growing up, but as far as watching the shows, it just wasn't my cup of tea. Increasingly in the last year or so, my kids especially have really pushed me to start watching more. I did enjoy the episodes that I saw of the Dragon Prince on Netflix. That was a good one. I've also heard good things about the Blood of Zeus. And I also saw that they added the X-Men anime onto Netflix, so that might be my gateway. So I'm definitely, if for no other reason that it's something different and it's something like a fresh take. So that's something I'll probably check out for that reason. Is it's something new. All right, next up, our last Star Wars reveal is a one oh man. Okay, a droid story. It's an animated series. A new hero is guided by R2D2 and C3PO. Dave, what do you think about a droid story?
Haven't we been here before? Like, wasn't there an animated series
Uh,
called Droids years ago? Like, I could swear we've been here before. This is the weirdest feeling. Are they gonna announce like an Ewoks movie next? Because I feel we had a couple of those already too. Like, I'm fairly certain there was a Droids cartoon already. Um, so I'm not sure about that particular read thread. I'm also a little unsure of sort of the oversaturation of R2D2 and C3PO. They've kind of become so ubiquitous, like they have to pop up in everything at some point. And I don't think they're as synonymous with Star Wars as even Lucas himself, I think, seems to think. I would have been perfectly fine, for example, if neither of them would have appeared in the prequels. In fact, I think it probably would have been a better idea to not have them appear. So, you know, if it's aimed squarely at kids, go for it. I'm sure it's going to be fine. But I have very, very little interest in more R2D2 and C3PO at this point.
Yeah, I'm the exact same mindset. I found it to be quite tiresome. I think their inclusion in the prequels only created problems thematically and story wise. Like, if Anakin Skywalker created C-3PO, why in the hell does he not recognize him as Darth Vader? And R2D2 is his best friend. R2D2 is his best friend and his droid companion. Like, how does he not recognize him?
And also, doesn't that make the whole "thank the maker" thing a little weird? Like, I just want to point that out. C3PO says "thank the maker" an awful lot. The maker is Darth Vader. I don't know how to feel about that whole situation, but sure.
That's just super problematic. And also, I think C-3PO is the most annoying character in all of Star Wars. I'm all about Han Solo and shutting him down for a while because he never shuts up. So I'm not a fan of the character. There are droids in the Star Wars universe that I am a fan of. Chopper from Rebels is probably my favorite, but I could do without. K2SO is great, but I'm quite fatigued by the inclusion of these two.
Yeah. Let's see what they do with it. I mean, maybe they'll convince me once some footage pops up, but in the meantime, pass.
All right, so we have two announcements that are not Star Wars related, but are being developed by Lucasfilm, so they are noteworthy for us. The fifth Indiana Jones film. Yeah, there's another one. It's coming July 2022 and is directed by James Mangold.
Yeah, Jesus Herbert Christ. Like, at this point, Harrison Ford is 78 years old. And they want to make another Indiana Jones movie starring Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones. I understand sticking with nostalgia and in loving the character and everything, but if you really want to continue making Indiana Jones movies, you're gonna have to eventually deal with the fact that Harrison Ford is too old for this. Not to jump on Danny Glover's bandwagon, but he is getting too old for this crap. And so at some point you're gonna have to decide if there are stories we want to tell with this character. Are we willing to recast? And if you're willing to recast, go for it. And if you're not willing to recast, then shut up about it. To circle back around to Star Wars for a second, I was thrilled to see Luke Skywalker at his height in The Mandalorian. It was amazing. It was a brief taste of something I've been wanting for a long time. But at the same token, let's be honest, when he lowered his hood, there were a whole bunch of nerds that were like, yeah, that didn't work out as well as they thought. Because the CGI technology is not quite there yet where they can create, a photorealistic visual of a person. It's just, it's a bit off still. And I'm not sure if they'll ever get that 100% right. Now, if he would have lowered his hood and it would have been a really smart recast, then you just created a situation where not only do we get this brief glimpse of Luke Skywalker, no, we can have like a whole Luke Skywalker series. We can actually follow him around once, as a younger man after Return of the Jedi at the height of his powers. I'm all for that. It worked really well with the Star Trek movies that they made, J.J. Abrams made. The casting there overall was really smart, and I believe those actors playing those roles. So am I interested in more Indiana Jones? Sure I am, and if you cast the right person to do it, I think there is a future for the franchise beyond 78-year-old Harrison Ford. Just like I think there might be a way for us to get more Luke Skywalker stories that don't necessarily involve Mark Hamill. Is that the ideal circumstance? Certainly not. But at some point, we're going to have to just deal with the fact that time is real, people age, and sometimes they age out of the roles that they made famous. I just don't know if I don't know how I feel about watching an almost 80-year-old man trying to crack a whip and be like this archaeologist that is like, 90% action hero, if we're completely honest. I have some reservations here.
Can I just point out, Dave, that you should look into fortune telling or prophecy, because you literally said, I want to see on screen Luke Skywalker in his prime. And literally days later, even before that episode aired, we recorded it ahead of time. That's exactly what happened. So you spoke that into existence, man. Um, but I am all for the internet like petition that is for casting Sebastian Stan as Luke Skywalker, because the likeness, if you put him up in a young Mark Hamill, it's not perfect. Nothing is going to be perfect because his name is not Mark Hamill and he's not 30 years younger. But I mean, it's about as good as you're going to get, and it is certainly less distracting than the CGI. And I think the CGI for Luke was a skosh better than Carrie Fisher's was in Rogue One, but it takes away from the scene, I think. And I think it would just been fine if they would have done it. Like it's okay. It's one scene in a show. I mean, that's what a majority of nerds are talking about. Is it's a little whatever. And also, you will not find a bigger fan of Harrison Ford than me, and I love him dearly. But for God's sake, he's old now, and we can't keep doing this. I mean, he was old in 2008 or whenever the fourth one came out, and it was bad. I mean, for God's sake, he tried to escape a nuclear bomb by hiding in a refrigerator. What the hell is that? And the crystal skull of aliens in a pyramid in the jungle, and we're going for more of that. Like, what? Come on now. And then it's just a mess. And I love the original, three indie films. Like they're so great. They're so fun. They're just so enjoyable. But you got to move on at some point. We have to go forward. And those three films still exist. You can go watch them. I think they're streaming on Netflix still. If not, go purchase them and you can watch them to your heart's content. But we've got to move forward at some point.
And I will say, as somebody with German ancestry, I'm not ever fond of the consistent fact that Nazis are always the bad guys and everything. But they are, when it comes to Indiana Jones, by far the most recognizable villain and the one that you always want to see him go up against. That is why they went back to that well again with Last Crusade, I think. But he is now so old that who are the bad guys going to be at this point? Like they were already in the last movie in the 50s, and they were trying to do the whole thing with the Russians, the Soviet Union. That I don't think worked all that well. It felt tonally not quite right. I mean, what are they going to do now? Is it going to be he's going to be fighting an army of counterculture hippies or something? Like they have to somehow in the story admit to themselves too that Indiana Jones is old. So where are they going to get their bad guys from here? I don't know. And to circle back to the recasting notion and the Luke Skywalker thing. Look, we're a Luke and a Leia short of having a new cast of the big three of the original Star Wars, Han, Luke, and Leia. If we can figure out how to recast those other two roles smartly, Luke and Leia, we could conceivably have some more Star Wars movies that take place in sort of like that dead zone between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, where, right now the Marvel comics were hanging out for a little while. I would kind of be interested in seeing that, bring in Alden Ehrenreich again as Han Solo and give us a movie of the original Star Wars era. I wonder if they would be able to capture the spirit and the tone of that the way J.J. Abrams attempted to capture the Star Trek feel and spirit. Like, I would be interested in that. I don't think that's necessarily, a sacred cow or something. I think we're just going to have to deal with the fact that these actors have aged. Some pass away, but maybe there's still life in those characters in some way. I would be interested in a recast. I'm there for it.
I am as well. And just think about, I mean, you've got Donald Glover, Alden Ehrenreich was delightful. Um, I think Sebastian Stan. I'll say it again. Like he's awesome as Bucky. He's awesome as the Winter Soldier, and I would love to see that going forward. And then if we could find another Leia, I think it would be great. And what better way to carry on the legacy of that and bridge all of that together and create like a coherent. I think for me, I talk about against nostalgia and everything, but for me, I think it's a necessary thing in this regard, is because it would bridge together the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy. How did we get here? And not only tickling the fancy of fans of the expanded universe, it would tie in so much, and how the First Order came to be, and why Luke's situation in the Last Jedi is what it is, and how he got there. Seeing those things, I think it would be so meaningful, and I think it would tie so much together.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think a lot of Star Wars fans would argue vehemently against recasting, but I don't know, man. I just want some more stories, and if they can do it well, why in the world wouldn't we go for that?
I totally agree. One final announcement. So I haven't seen the original from '88, but Willow, uh, the sequel, is coming in 2022, and nerd icon Warwick Davis is returning.
Yeah, so I have seen the original several times. To me, the movie Willow is incredibly iconic. One of my favorite fantasy movies of my youth. I adore that movie, and the idea of getting a sequel to it, even this late in the game, all these years later, I am absolutely sold on this. I know we talk about moving forward and nostalgia bad and all that, but yeah, you know what, Willow holds a very special place in my heart, and seeing that character and that world again, absolutely there for it. But it does beg an interesting question: where the crap is Val Kilmer in all this? Because, because Val Kilmer played like a breakout sort of starring role in this movie. He's sort of Warwick Davis's co-star, Matt Madigan, and he is so good in that role. He was so watchable and magnetic in that role. And I would love to see that character again too, but we have heard not a peep about them even like approaching Val Kilmer to bring him back for this or anything. And I think that would be a huge missed opportunity. I think Val is still working. I know he's older. I know he's gained some weight. But you know what? One of the things about Willow's world is that that particular character was always a little bit of a weirdo. And there's no reason that Matt Madigan himself would not, get older and gain a little bit of weight and get a little comfortable in his old age. So I would totally love to see Val Kilmer come back for this as well. And I really hope it's just something that they're going to surprise us with, and they've just not made an announcement. But if they don't include him, I think I'll be sorely disappointed.
It's really inexcusable that I haven't seen this movie. I'm a huge fantasy fan, and I'm excited that this is happening, because I think after Peter Jackson finally, finally said goodbye to Middle Earth, we've had a serious void when it comes to like fantasy films and fantasy stories. We're still waiting on the Lord of the Rings series on Amazon to happen. So I really just need to go watch this, because Warwick Davis, I mean, when you talk about Professor Flitwick, when you talk about, the Ewoks, when you talk about the roles that Warwick Davis has played in nerddom, I think he was even in the Solo film, if I remember correctly. And so, like, I just love all the characters that he's portrayed. Val Kilmer, I just love the guy. I ride for Val Kilmer, and this may ruffle some feathers, but I love Batman Forever. I know maybe it's because it's like probably the first Batman movie I watched growing up, so maybe that plays a part in it. And it does have its issues with the campiness and the cartoonness, but I don't think he's a bad Bruce Wayne. I think he's really good as Batman, and I really enjoyed his portrayal, even revisiting it, years later. So I would love to see that. I would love to see Val Kilmer back, and I love the dude.
It's funny you say that you kind of ride for Batman Forever, because I kind of do too. I think the I think the worst part of that movie is focused, solely on the villains. Uh, I think Jim Carrey was way too over the top as the Riddler. And I think even, the choices that they made with Two-Face, where he comes across less as, Two-Face and more as like a bargain bin dollar store brand Joker. I think those were the missteps of the movie for the most part. But I think Val Kilmer was very good as Bruce Wayne Batman. Plus, it also features probably the thirstiest Batman character I've ever seen in Nicole Kidman's Dr. Chase Meridian. I don't think I have ever seen anybody come on to Batman the way she did in that rooftop scene. That was, ooh, I have to say that was intense.
She was bringing the heat, man. I bet Tom Cruise was jealous.
Yeah, there was definitely some heat there. So but Val Kilmer in Willow. If you've not seen the movie, you got to see it. It's a ton of fun. Warwick Davis in the original Willow plays sort of the Luke Skywalker role. The righteous and true character who just wants to do good, and Val Kilmer is basically the Han Solo role. He's the scoundrel of the movie, and it's absolutely delightful to watch. So again, I cannot picture a sequel to Willow without Val Kilmer. I definitely hope he's there.
All right, that wraps up our Byword Big Talk for the week. That's all of Disney Investors Day. If you missed our MCU takes, be sure to check out our previous episode. This has been Lucasfilm. When we come back from our final break, we're going to hit you with 2 more patented nerd commendations. All right, welcome back for our final segment, Nerd Commendations. Dave, you got another Chuck Dixon recommendation for us.
Dude, I like Chuck Dixon. I'm just going to say it. His work on the Batman franchise was really good. And I miss some of that stuff. So this is one of the trade paperbacks that sits actually on my shelf and that I frequently revisit, and that is Nightwing Year One. So Dick Grayson is simply one of my favorite characters. I'm not going to lie, I'm a sidekick kind of guy. Oftentimes, when I watch movies or read comics, I gravitate towards the sidekick more than the hero. I always loved Robin, almost more than Batman, I will freely admit. I will also freely admit that maybe I kind of see myself more in the sidekick. Maybe that's the humble person in me speaking, that I don't identify so much with the hero and more with the sidekick. But if you're looking at like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, my favorite character on there for many years was Xander Harris, the smart alecky sidekick who didn't have any special powers. I kind of gravitate towards those characters. And Dick Grayson is, basically the original sidekick. And just a great character. His evolution from Robin into Nightwing is really one of the best stories of a sidekick coming into his own, or growing up, really in all of comics. The guy is beloved for a reason. So Chuck Dixon, who wrote Nightwing Year One, also wrote his ongoing title at the time. He wrote the ongoing Robin title featuring Tim Drake. He wrote several Batman titles. He was basically one of the architects of Batman comics for a hot second. He was also involved in the creation of Birds of Prey. So Chuck Dixon has a really deep history with the Batman family. And here, he weaves a tale of trying to remake yourself, of finding yourself by turning to your roots and then using your upbringing to kind of reforge yourself into something new, finding a direction forward through your heritage and your past. So after a falling out with Batman, Robin is out on his own. He checks in with Superman and then returns to his origin point, Haley's Circus. Circumstances, of course, conspire to bring him back into the superhero game, and these experiences help him reshape himself from Robin into Nightwing, his own hero. Scott McDaniel is on art here, and he brings a fantastic sort of kinetic energy to Dick Grayson. It works really well since, well, Dick Grayson is a circus performer. He is an acrobat, and sort of that movement is all present in the comic book. It's a very movement-focused art. It feels like there's a lot of forward momentum in the art, and I really adore it for that. So in short, no matter how old this tale gets or whether it agrees with current continuity, I really don't care. It totally holds up to this day as sort of the definite transition story of Robin to Nightwing. And unlike a certain television show, they didn't even have to drop an F-bomb to make it work.
well, see, and I completely echo your sentiments about the sidekicks, and particularly the Robins slash Nightwing. So, like, they're always the characters that I've been much more interested in. Even back to like the Batman films, Chris O'Donnell was super compelling to me. And just I don't know, maybe it was even something about the uniform of Robin seemed so cool, and just like maybe it was because I was younger, I could identify with it, but I've always been fascinated with those characters. And you know, when I started playing the Arkham games, and Dick shows up as Nightwing, and that's the first time I'd seen Nightwing, like, who is that? And no, he said Dick, that means Dick Grayson. So it's just really cool to have followed this character, even as, like, you know, kind of a casual consumer as I am. But you know, and Damian Wayne is one of my favorite DC characters. Tim Drake is fantastic. And it's the one reason that I tried to watch Titans, but there's just so many things going on with that show. I really want to give it another try because I've heard it gets better as the show goes on, but it's just a little bit too much for me. But I'm definitely fascinated with this character. It's also one of my son's favorites, so he's going to be very proud of me if I were to start reading some Nightwing.
And I will say, you know, his solo series, also written by Chuck Dixon, was really good stuff at the time too. But you know, this storyline, I think it took place fairly late in his solo series. They kind of did like this extended year one flashback, but it's a great starting point if you're interested in reading more about Nightwing. Really awesome stuff. Now, Chris, you're taking me back to the X-Men. What do you got for me this week?
Well, I'm giving you a break from Thor because next week I'm going back to Thor. So, but I will say this will make you happy. It's a Tom Taylor book.
I can live with that.
X-Men Red from 2018. Words by Tom Taylor, art by the incredible Mahmoud Asrar. Also some art by John Bazaldua and Carmen Carnero and Paolo Villanelli. Tom Taylor, I am telling you, he's quickly becoming one of my favorite creators after reading both this series, X-Men Red, and Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, which I recommended months ago. I know that he does extensive work with DC, so I'm telling you, that might be an effective on-ramp for me to start reading some more DC titles. Speaking of Nightwing, I heard that he is going to be the new writer on Nightwing, so I'm super excited for that.
So am I.
What I particularly love about Tom and his writing is that he understands who his characters are at their very core. Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, despite being this minor B, even C-list title, if you want to say, with no real ramifications for continuity, I'm telling you, that was the best Peter Parker has been written in years. All respect to Dan Slott and Nick Spencer. That's the best Peter Parker I've read in a long time. This title absolutely nails some more characters that are near and dear to my heart, like Nightcrawler, Kurt Wagner, Gambit, Remy LeBeau, Storm, and Jean Grey. This title also served as an introduction and a deeper understanding for characters who became instant favorites for me. And that includes Wolverine, Laura Kinney, Trinary, who I believe was introduced in this book for the first time. She's fascinating. And my new favorite character in the entire Marvel universe, and Dave, you're going to freaking love her, Honey Badger, Gabby Kinney, who is also a clone of Wolverine. I know, more clones, but hear me out. Like, she has these incredible one-liners. The reason you're going to love her is because she's like this tiny little kid. Like, she's this little sprout. So, like, all those... that unique storytelling point that you were talking about, you wish people more developed, expounded on. This is great. Listen to some of these great one-liners. So Wolverine, Laura is talking. I sense a butt coming. Gabby says, sensing approaching butts would be a super weird mutant power.
that's pretty good.
Here's another one. Trinary is talking. It can still track mutants, but I've removed the killing. If I wanted, I could recode it to track down mutants and cook them a light meal. Gabby says, I'd be up for a Sentinel chef. She's just delightful. Like, she also goes straight up to Namor, the king of Atlantis, one of those powerful people on planet Earth in the Marvel universe, and says, hey, Namor, I'm going to need you to put a shirt on. Ablantis can show off later. Like, she's just awesome. So, Gabby Kinney, Honey Badger, just read anything with her in it. So the basic premise for this book, X-Men Red, I got sidetracked by how delightful Gabby is. After a decade of being dead, Jean Grey is resurrected by the Phoenix Force. And this was on like a mini series event or something that I'll go back and read. But basically, what you need to know from that series is Jean Grey's been resurrected by the Phoenix Force, and she assembles her own team of X-Men. And attempts to persuade the United Nations to grant mutant kind their own nationhood and sovereignty. She goes up against Cassandra Nova. You may have heard of her from Whedon's astonishing run or Grant Morrison's fantastic run on New X-Men. She's just a fascinating villain, and she's really brilliantly used by Tom Taylor here. It's really, really interesting to see that she is the twin of Charles Xavier, looks exactly like him, but where Charles approaches the world with love and empathy, she is the exact opposite of that. So that's a really, really fascinating thing to watch develop. What I came away from reading this book is that hate and prejudice are no match for the power of love and empathy, and that's Jean Company's central ethos. As she's facing off against Cassandra Nova here, I've got the panel pulled up. It just brings tears to your eyes just listening to this. And this was written in 2018, so what was happening just 2 years ago, and things unfortunately that are still happening. And she says, see, people like you with so much fear and hate in their heads, you're always so quick to confuse empathy with weakness. Empathy isn't weakness. It just means we have something bigger than ourselves to fight for. And that makes us dangerous. You have made me dangerous. And Cassandra says, I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of your X-Men. And Jean replies, yes, you are. Of course you are. You're afraid of what we represent. You're afraid of our compassion. And you're afraid of what it says about that you have none. You're afraid that you're wrong, that you're less, that you're lacking. And that's just like this beautiful thing that I've always searched for, when I started reading comic books, whether that was Spider-Man, whether that was Captain America, whether that was, now Superman, that I'm starting to read more of his books, and certainly the X-Men, like just fighting hatred and bigotry and awfulness with love and compassion, killing them with kindness to the nth degree. So I just love this book. There are so many panels that are just uplifting that brought a tear to my eye, like that one. As well as some iconic one-liners from Gabby, who I just absolutely adore. And I am immediately, as soon as I posted this panel, on social media, it got like over 200 likes and 60 retweets. And then everybody was in my mentions telling me, you have to read All New Wolverine. So I looked it up. Tom Taylor wrote All New Wolverine when Laura Kinney took over the moniker. And that's Gabby's introduction and her creation. So I'm immediately going to start reading Tom Taylor's run on All New Wolverine for more Laura and Gabby content. So X-Men Red is my nerd commendation for this week.
Well, yeah, I have to say, you've convinced me, actually. I've heard good things about X-Men Red before, from various, social media posts and the like, and I'm definitely interested. Jean Grey leading her own team of X-Men is already interesting. I think Jean is a great character. I've heard some people say that this sort of feels a little bit of the same cloth of something like Claremont or Lee's eras on the X-Men, traditional superheroic stuff mixed with sort of the X-Men trying to protect people who hate them, and that kind of stuff is just classic X-Men to me. That's the kind of X-Men stuff I really like. I've made no secret of the fact that I find the current X-Men direction extremely dense and difficult to follow for newcomers. So I think this is probably much more up my alley. Especially after reading, Morrison's and Whedon's runs, I might have to just go ahead and bounce over to X-Men Red for a good read.
Yeah, and the nice thing about it is it's only 11 issues. So I read it in like a day, and it's really, really good. Now, this runs concurrently with X-Men Gold and X-Men Blue, which I have my feelings about. So there are some real good parts of X-Men Gold, but X-Men Blue, I'm just not enjoying as much. But X-Men Red, only 11 issues and one annual that I just got in the mail, so I'm going to read that one as well. But yeah, it's really a great series, and it's just a really, really a good time.
Sounds like something to try.
All right, that wraps up our another episode of the Nerd Byword podcast. As always, we thank you for joining us. We thank you for your support. If you're looking for more awesome content from us, make sure that you subscribe to our podcasts wherever you get your podcast from, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the TuneIn app, Amazon, you name it, or nerdbyword.com.
And also feel free to check in with us on social media. You can find us on Twitter and on Instagram at Nerd Byword, and individually at That Nerd Kris and at That Nerd Dave, and of course on Facebook, that would be The Nerd Byword.
Speaking of Facebook, be sure to check out our pal Phil Russert's page on there called CreatorCon Q&A. Also, he has a YouTube page, so if you're not a Facebook person, we totally understand. But YouTube as well, CreatorCon Q&A. 2 or 3 times a week, he's sitting down with an industry professional or a comic collector and some really fascinating interviews. Kara Nicole is a really famous comedian and really funny person. She's a cosplayer as well. He just did a great episode with her last night. So be sure to check out Phil's page. He's been very, very supportive of us. And we actually appeared on there a couple weeks ago. So we always appreciate him and want to give him a shout out as well. All right. Thanks for another episode. And as always, stay well and stay nerdy.
The Nerd Byword is written and produced by Kris and Dave, 2 nerds with a love of all things pop culture. The podcast features music by Al Jimenez and show art by Ashery Design. Find us at nerdbyword.com and wherever podcasts are available.